What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network for the top 10 decks of week number 2 of the Fusion Strike standard format for the Pokemon trading card game. This will again mostly be based off of my opinions on what the top 10 decks are right now. And I'm thinking about this in terms of what are the top 10 decks I would play to a major event, and what are the top 10 decks on my radar that I expect to play against at a major event. And hopefully by next week, we'll have enough event results accumulating that I can start doing this based on actual performances and statistics of how the decks are doing. So, before we get into it, shout out to PotownStore.com, the best place to get PTCGO codes, and be sure to use code CELIO for 5% off. Also, CardTrooperGames.com has booster boxes and singles in stock, and you can use code CELIO for 5% off over there as well. All of my standard format deck lists are on PokemonCard.io, and all of the deck lists that are included in today's video, that's right, we'll have 10 deck lists for the top 10 decks today. Those are all available on my PokemonCard.io page. Links for all of that are in the description down below. Now let's get into it. So just a quick review. This is last week's top 10. So if you had not already watched last week's top 10 video, these were the top 10 decks for the first week, going into the first full week of Fusion Strike on PTCGO, for tournaments being played on play.limitlesstcg.com, and the occasional in real life event like the Full Grip 1K. I think there was another 1K in the Midwest or something, so there have been some real life events, not official of course, that have been going on. So last week we had Mew VMAX at the top spot, followed shortly or closely by Single Strike Urshifu Umbreon and Suicune Ludicolo. Down on number 10, I had kind of my wild card pick, which was Galarian Weezing variants, and I actually ended up playing that during the week myself to a top 8 of a tournament that I think had about 200 players or so. I don't remember the exact amount of players, but I do have a whole top 8 deck profile on that and my gameplay and everything, if you haven't already checked out that video on the channel. But yeah, so let's start looking at what I think going into this week. Today is, well, when you're watching this, it's going to be November 22nd. So for the week of November 22nd, let's see what I think. The top 3, I've got staying in the same exact spots. I think Mew VMAX is a very, very strong, consistent, powerful deck. It can even beat its bad matchups. And I think it's what most players are basing their choices off of, or it's at least the deck that's most players are having in their mind when they're deciding to play a deck if they are not playing Mew VMAX. Single Strike Urshifu Umbreon can realistically beat just about anything, and it has a favored matchup versus Mew. Suicune Ludicolo, another deck that can just about beat most decks, and it can be piloted with skill. We've seen Gabriel Sameto play this deck to a lot of top finishes. His list has barely even changed since the Evolving Skies meta. So Suicune Ludicolo also, I think, deserves to just keep its spot in the top 3. These are 3 very, very strong decks. I do think they are the best decks of the format right now. Moving down to the 4 and 5 spots, I have Leafeon and Jolteon actually moving up to 4 and 5. They were 7 and 6 respectively last week in my list. Actually, coincidentally, my mom has been playing Leafeon and Jolteon. I think only Leafeon and Jolteon for Fusion Strike, and the 2 weekends of Fusion Strike tournaments that have been on Play Limitless, she played in 2 tournaments each weekend and top cut both tournaments. And I think 2 were with Jolteon and 2 were with Leafeon. And those are lists we've been working on together, and I think that both of those decks are good right now. Jolteon taking a very good matchup to Suicune, and also a kind of a weird matchup versus Mew VMAX, but the win percentage is kind of 50-50-ish, and taking its bad matchup to Urshi. And then Leafeon taking a great matchup to Urshi, and kind of a 50-50-ish matchup to Suicune, and then struggling against Mew VMAX, but it is able to beat it. I think these decks are pretty consistent, and I think having those top decks, Urshi being having one of its only really bad matchups to Leafeon, and Suicune having one of its only really bad matchups to Jolteon brings these decks up a lot, since those top decks aren't only top performing, but they're also top popularity. And Leafeon and Jolteon are just good in general against a lot of stuff. Next, we have Rapid Strike Urshifu Melanie moving down to number 6 with the popularity of Mew VMAX. And Urshifu just not having a lot of amazing matchups, being very popular in the metagame. It's a great deck intrinsically, but nothing's really telling me this is the time to play Urshifu Melanie. You know, I'm sure there will be spots throughout this metagame where it will feel like that. Urshifu Melanie is a great deck within itself, and all of these decks on the top 10 list are decks that I think can win a tournament and are worthy of playing, but just Urshifu Melanie is moving down in the ranks for me this week. Newly, we have Zacian Zamazenta, which was not on my list last week. Joshua Sutherland won a pretty big online tournament with Zacian Zam, and I thought there were enough things countering Zacian Zam that it would just stay out. You know, Mew VMAX can actually hit through it, and then you also have Genesect. Single Strike Urshifu can hit through Zam. Zacian, Suicune seems to be more efficient at trading than Zacian and Zam are. Jolteon plays Path to the Peak. Dragapult plays Path to the Peak. But and also the new Inteleon VMAX from Rapid Strike Inteleon VMAX plays Path to the Peak. But I think I was looking too much into the things that can get through Zamazenta and just kind of pushing to the side the fact that Zacian is very strong and consistent. And in the hands of a good player, that strong consistency sometimes will get you there. So Zacian Zam returning to the top 10 list. It was here, I think, for all of my Evolving Skies videos of this sort. But it was missing last week, and I do have it up here at number 7, newly on the list. We'll see how that changes next week when we bring actual statistics and results into the top 10 decks for week 3. At 8, we have Dragapult moving down from number 4. So Dragapult was potentially number 1 prior to Fusion Strike, and then I brought it down to number 4 with the release of Fusion Strike, and it has just not been being played a lot, and I can see why. There's a lot of Single Strike Urshi, and there's a lot of Gengar VMAX variants, and other dark type attackers like Galarian Moltres being teched in, Galarian Weezing Sableye variants, just all in preparation of trying to beat Mew VMAX, and Dragapult VMAX is taking that collateral damage. Also, some of these decks we're mentioning, like the Mew VMAX deck is less weak to bench sniping. Now, I do think Dragapult VMAX can take a good matchup versus Mew if built to counter Mew, you know, Path to the Peak, Fan of Waves, possibly even Crushing Hammers or something, some sort of extra energy denial. But it's not where it was, and partially because Urshifu Rapid Strike is not as popular, and some of the Inteleon engine decks are becoming less popular in favor of, you know, Mew VMAX, Single Strike Urshifu V, Gengar VMAX with either the Single Strike engine or even some with the Galarian Weezing engine, but also some with the Inteleon engine. But yeah, Dragapult's just moving down a little for me this week. And then we have Rapid Strike Inteleon VMAX, which entered the Fusion Strike top 10 at number 9 for me, and it's going to stay there at number 9. I still think it's good, but it's not showing me that it deserves to be any higher, but it's still a deck that I consider to be in my top 10. And lastly, for the number 10 spot, which is new this week, is Urshifu Rapid Strike with Galarian Moltres. A player whose username was KVI had a very strong record this week in the Saturday GG Tour $500 cash tournament with Galarian Moltres V. And there was also there was also another player playing Galarian Moltres V with Rapid Strike Urshifu in that event and other events over the past week. And this is a deck that I talk about frequently in these kinds of videos. It has everything there on paper. It has the strength of Rapid Strike Urshifu's Rapid Flow. It has Gale Thrust hitting Fighting Weakness. And it has Galarian Moltres hitting Dark Weakness and Accelerating Energy with the help of Energy Switch to chain Rapid Flows. It is a great deck on paper. It's just a matter of getting it to work. And it looks like people are getting it to work, and that's why it's made the top 10 list today. So there are my top 10 decks. Let's take a quick look at the deck lists that I have built for them and that you can find over on PokemonCard.io. And if you need codes for them, check out PotownStore.com for the PTCGO codes, and real cards, you can head on over to CardTrooperGames.com. So we have my Mew VMAX Genesect list here. Tord has added Vitality Band to his Mew VMAX list, and I thought that was really smart because if you Cross Fusion Strike copy Technoblast, it does 220, and then you need one less power tablet to one-shot an opposing Mew VMAX. Now, also in that vein, Oricorio helps you in the mirror match if your opponent is implementing this strategy of the Vitality Band. I've also switched from 4 Cramomatic and 3 Cross Switcher to a vice versa count of 3 Cramomatic and 4 Cross Switcher. I'm still not sure if I'm in love with this. I felt fine with just 3 Cross Switcher and 4 Cramomatic, but I'm seeing if this works out for me now. I also think that the Cramomatics, whether you're playing 3 or 4 of them, also the Battle VIP Pass, could potentially be cut for a 4th in this slot. But the Cramomatic slot could also be Pokegears, or it could be Rotom Phone. Next, we have Single Strike Urshifu VMAX. I'm staying pretty simple with this, tossing in a couple Great Balls, but I don't really want to lose my Tower of Darknesses. I don't want to lose more than 1. I think 3 is a fine count, especially because I'm running 2 Crobat V, and bumping Path to the Peak feels pretty powerful if that's your opponent's plan to stop you from winning, whether that is because you need to draw cards with Crobat V or you want to gust them up with Umbreon VMAX. But Path to the Peak is very popular because it also hurts Mew VMAX, so I personally like having that 3rd Tower of Darkness, and really not much else special to say about this list. I think it just works. Next, we have the Suicune Ludicolo. I myself am a fan of the 3 rare candy because you can discard a candy at some point in the game with Quick Ball or Research, or prize one. You can also use one for Ludicolo, and you can have another one to use on an Inteleon if you so choose to, or that last one's for Ludicolo. I like having the flex space of 3 rare candy, and I play 2/0/2 line of Ludicolo because sometimes you want to use a candy on Inteleon, but if you're only playing 2, you feel like you can't candy Inteleon sometimes unless it's for the game winning play, because you want to save those candies for Ludicolo when you need them. So I do like the 3 rare candy, and I think Fan of Waves is pretty imperative to play right now to get Fusion Strike energy off of Mew VMAX so you can use Quick Shooting to ping the Mew VMAX for extra damage when you need it. I've wanted to fit an Echoing Horn in the deck as well, but I don't want to sacrifice consistency for that. Next is Leafeon VMAX. Like I mentioned, my mom played this to several finishes so far in the Fusion Strike metagame, and my friend and coaching client, Pat Wall, also played this to a top 16 finish in the Sunday Open this past weekend. If I were to have played Leafeon VMAX at all this weekend, this is the one I would have played. 2 Fan of Waves is great against a lot of decks, including Hiding Dark Energy that you'll see in Gengar VMAX variants. Also, before I forget, Gengar VMAX would have been on this top 10 list at the number 10 spot. The Gengar VMAX, probably Azul's version. I guess the Single Strike version's fine too. But I asked to Twitter, and they said they wanted the Urshifu variants listed separately if they were going to be on the list. And so Galarian, Moltres, Urshifu knocked Gengar down to number 11, unfortunately, this week. So maybe next week the Gengar stands will have their day. But yeah, so for this Leafeon VMAX list, I think this is pretty close to perfect. I love playing healing in Leafeon, whether that be Pokemon Center Lady, Cook, or a split of them. But with Dragapult and Jolteon being on the low in popularity terms, it seemed like the perfect time to cut the healing and play an extra boss's orders to help boss around the Mews that have free retreat and knock out your opponent's Genesects. Next is Jolteon VMAX. I haven't changed this since the day Fusion Strike came out, or probably before that, honestly, when I had built this or drafted up the list. Not much changes since Evolving Skies, except Fan of Waves was like kind of a preference call prior to Fusion Strike, but I think now you have to play the Fan of Waves. Because it's just so strong to go Marnie, Fan of Waves, Path of the Peak against Mew. And if they fall apart on that turn, you just start spraying so much damage that the game gets out of control. And typically you'll win from there. So I love having Fan of Waves in this deck. I play double Cheryl and double Zigzagoon now because I don't want to prize either of them. Although a lot of times you will only use one Zigzagoon or one Cheryl in a game, but they're just so important to the strategy of this deck that I play two of them in the list at this point. Next, we have my Rapid Strike Urshifu Melanie deck that I have changed since the release of Fusion Strike, and I'm really liking this one. The Inteleon VMAX line at 2-2 and having a Cheryl in the deck has allowed me to beat Psychic-type matchups quite frequently, whether that's Shadow Rider or Mew or Dragapult, because you can get that damage in with Inteleon, take a hit, Cheryl, get the damage in again, and then from there, it doesn't matter if you put that Urshifu into the active because you've already gotten an extra turn out of the game, so you can go for a Passimian Sight, Rapid Flow 180, 180 turn, whatever it is that you need to do. So I'm loving the 2-2 Inteleon in there, plus the Cheryl, because the Cheryl can also work for Rapid Strike Urshifu. Because I have cut down to the 1-1 Octillery line, however, I am playing 3 Melanie, 1 Raihan, because Raihan can also search out Rapid Strike energy, so instead of 4 Melanie, we've got the 3-1 split now. And next we have Zacian Zamazenta. This is just Joshua Sutherland's list. It's a pretty simple deck overall, even regardless of which list you're choosing, and this is a pretty simple list. 4 Boss, 4 Research, 4 Rodham Phone, 4 so many 4-ofs. You get everything you want most of the time just by raw drawing into it. Intrepid Sword early, the Rodham Phones to set your top decks with a Rodham Phone, and then Primate Wisdom from Guru to draw into what you need. I have seen some people play Sir Chester Bath in here. Some people go heavier on heals and play like the Lucky Ice Pop or Moo Moo Milk, things like that. This deck is fine like this because you can either go defensive with the Zam or aggressive with the Zacian. The 4 Boss makes that turn 2 Brave Blade a real threat as well. Dragapult VMAX Inteleon. Another deck I haven't really made any changes to, and there's nothing too crazy about the list that I have up here. If you want to go Crushing Hammers, you can, and at that point you start cutting consistency cards like Level Ball or Quick Ball. Maybe you cut the 4th Basic Psychic or the 4th Horror Energy. You might cut a Scoop Up Net, you might cut a Drizzle. You might cut, I don't know what else, maybe Second Boss to fit the 4 Crushing Hammers, which when they flip heads are going to be really good, but if your deck doesn't run consistently, sometimes it won't even matter if you flip heads or tails. So the Fan of Waves get guaranteed use, and there's so many decks using special energies, so without a doubt I play them. And yeah, if you want to play Crushing Hammers, go for it. I'm kind of iffy on them, so I went with the deck list that I would kind of just go with a gut decision on for Dragapult. The number 9 deck is Rapid Strike Inteleon VMAX. I've made one change to it, which was I added Karina's Focus, since it's just an extra draw card and you can search it out with Rapid Strike Search from Octillery, because I've noticed that there are a lot of times where I have Octillery in play and I don't need anything. I have my energy, I have my Inteleon VMAX, I have, there's not much else I need to do. So, and a lot of times I just find myself Octillery for a card that's in the deck and then attack. So, added a Karina in. Extra draw card, something to search with Octillery. And lastly, we've got Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX with Galarian Moltres. This deck, I've been saying for a while, it just needs to run consistent. So I've got 2 energy searches, so you can try to get those dark energy into the discard pile. We've got 2 Raihan, because those are great. If you can start a Sobble and keep calling, and then get a Raihan turn going, that's really good. Crobat, because sometimes you need extra draw power to get into the cards you need, like discarding that dark energy to start using the Dire Flame Wings ability. And that is going to be my top 10 list for this week. On the left side, we've got last week's top 10, and then on the right, the new top 10 list for this week of November 22nd, with the arrows depicting what their changes were from week 1 to week 2. And like I said, next week I plan on having actual data and tournament results influencing the decks on the top 10 list and their positions on the list. So if you enjoyed this video, I do appreciate a like and a comment, and please do subscribe for daily Pokemon TCG content. Check out my sponsors, Potown Store, Card Trooper Games, and PokemonCard.io. I do have a Discord link in the description if you'd like to join our Discord for discussion, questions, and whatever else you would like to talk Pokemon TCG there. And with that, have a great day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.